Looks like Hurricane Sandy was really a big wake-up call. What concrete steps have you seen businesses take in the wake of Hurricane Sandy to better prepare themselves for natural disasters?
Thank you for having me, Olivia. I'm really happy to be here. The thing is that whenever anything happens, we have an opportunity to learn from that by testing our plans. Organizations figure out what works and maybe what didn't. So, for example, here in New York City, our concepts of resilience are forever based on our experiences of 9/11 and what happened then. So, because 9/11 only physically impacted downtown Manhattan, it then became best practice for recovery sites to be located maybe 30 miles, 50 miles away. A lot of them are in Westchester or New Jersey. Now, Hurricane Sandy comes through and impacts the whole region, and suddenly that doesn't work quite so well when you have widespread infrastructure problems, power outages, and fuel shortages.
So how have businesses gone about differently about the way they approach this? Do they now think about disaster relief and preparedness and differently in terms of how they should have resources spread across geographic areas?
Right. I think that the key here is to review what happened and then apply some key best practices. So what that means for organizations is that they have to conduct a risk assessment. They need to look at their organization, look at their business process, and figure out where perhaps they're vulnerable. I think a key point to remember in that process is that organizations should look at not just their internal problems, but also throughout their supply chain to figure out where those vulnerabilities are. Then they need to figure out what the impact of that would look like on their business, and then they can create a plan for how their organization will continue to operate under duress.
One of the biggest threats, of course, to business continuity is the threat of an interruption to your fuel supply if you do not get the natural gas or oil you need delivered. What should businesses be doing to prepare themselves for that?
That's a great point for business continuity because it is a predictable impact of an outage of any sort of event. So organizations absolutely need to have a plan and they can prepare for that. That's the good news about looking at it from the impact side rather than the risk side. And that's what why business continuity is different, because we're looking at those impacts, like a gas shortage.
How about personally? Anything we should be doing at home to prepare for the possible disruption of fuel supplies?
Yes, I think it's pretty key to remember that when the forecast is predicting extreme weather, that it's a good idea to fill up your gas tank ahead of time instead of waiting until during the incident or certainly after the incident, where that's going to be much more difficult.
Well, speaking of extreme weather, if you are in the upper Midwest, somewhere around Minneapolis perhaps, they've just had a foot of snow. You're wondering if once again severe weather is the new normal. Are businesses planning for that?
I think that we will see a lot more extreme weather. This is the new normal. We are seeing the impacts of climate change. We're seeing widespread droughts in the West. We're seeing wildfires. We're seeing tornadoes in places like Joplin, Missouri. And when you talk about snow, of course, we're seeing the forecast threatening that this is coming in our direction. I think that organizations can apply some practical measures to prepare their organizations for it. For example, they should prepare for operating within telecommuting. They need to reserve blocks of hotel rooms for their employees that are maybe closer to the office in case they get stranded. And they need to conduct an analysis to figure out when their peak periods for their business are, when they might need to allocate extra resource or stockpile, for example. So here on the air, we talk a lot about holidays and retailers. That's a peak period for retailers. But if you're a florist, it might be Valentine's Day, or it might be for a beer supplier, Super Bowl Sunday. The key is about building a culture of resilience.
It all makes sense. Although if you are one of those employees, you might not be so happy to learn that your employer has gone ahead and prepared for the eventuality of you having to stay in a motel next door.